you don't have any idea of the word canon and the connotation of it. I don't think you have any idea. Ah, have you any idea on this word canon? Do you have any knowledge on the word canon? Yes or no? Hello?
No, sir.
You don't have any knowledge on the word canon, na? So, please note, please write. Huh? I am dictating the definition of the word canon. Okay? Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Uh, so, please write. Huh? Canon. Definition of canon. 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 Are you ready? Participants, are you ready to write the meaning of the word canon?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Uh, canon uh, in literature, canon can be defined as that which is accepted as authentic. Again, I'm repeating. In literature, canon can be defined as that which is accepted as authentic, which is accepted as authentic. Uh, it is usually defined more broadly. It is usually defined more broadly as that which is assumed to be good literature. I'm repeating again. It is usually defined more broadly as that which is assumed, ASSUMED, which is assumed to be good literature. The term canon uh, is a Hebrew, Hebrew, Hebrew Greek word, Hebrew Greek word, Hebrew hyphen Greek, Hebrew Greek word, meaning CA and E, cane, within inverted comma, CA and E, cane, which means measuring rod, which means measuring rod. Uh, passed into Christian usage, passed into Christian usage to mean norm, NORM, norm within inverted comma. So, roughly what actually it is it belongs to Hebrew Greek category. Which word? Which word? Which
Can.
word? Canon. Which word? Canon. Canon actually belongs to which category? Hebrew Greek word, Hebrew Greek category. What does it mean? It means cane, C-A-N-E, cane, and the meaning of the word cane is measuring rod. It passed into Christian usage. With the passage of time, it passed into Christian usage to mean norm, N-O-R-M, norm, a rule of faith. Norm or rule of faith. The term literary canon, the term literary canon refers to a body of books, comma, narratives, and other text. The term literary canon refers to a body of books, narratives, and other text considered to be the most important, considered to be the most important and influential of a particular time period or place, of a particular time period or place, of a particular time period or place. Okay, are you all noting down?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Are you all noting down the
Yes,
definitions
sir.
of the word canon?
Yes, sir.
Uh, so, canon formation means canon formation means uh, the artistic quality, the artistic quality of certain literary works. Canon formation means the artistic quality of certain literary works. In other words, full stop. In other words, certain writers and genres through socialization, through socialization and institutionalization, through socialization and institutionalization are accepted by all the society and acquire legal uh, status and acquire legal status. So roughly, uh, you get the definition of the word canon formation, and literary canons or canon formation. Okay, uh, are you able to write down as I dictated?
Sir.
So, Acha, what do
Yes,
you
sir.
mean by institutionalization of literature? The institutionalization of literature. What do you understand by it? Uh, uh, so let us, if you like, you can institutionalization of literature. Participants, as we know, such literature, uh, literature. So now we are going to define institutionalization of literature. Institutionalization of literature. So as we know, such literature aims aims to go beyond individual characteristic and ideas. To go beyond individual characteristics and ideas. Try to understand it. So here the subject matters are not confined to individual characteristics and ideas. So it means historic changes are marked, and such changes affect the task of literary criticism. So history, it means historic changes take place. Historic changes take place. Historic changes are marked, and such changes affect the tasks of literary criticism. So while discussing uh, canon and canons in Indian literature, it is important to know. It is important to have idea, a brief idea about these words. That is why I dictated you the meanings of canons, institutionalization of literature. Uh, to begin with, participants, to begin with, the debate of defining, or to begin with the debate of defining, or to begin with the debate on differing interpretations of the word canon, we must first discuss the present academic state of English literature. It is important on our part to know about the academic state of English literature. So, in its present form, it has come to embody a whole range of literary, social, and cultural signifiers that determine important aspects of the world of the academic institutions. And their participants, the one uh, the one outside it. For the non-academic populace, a degree in English literature indicates a specialization in English as a language. For the non-academic populace, A degree in English literature indicates a specialization in English as a language. But people are, people who are part of the literate minority, people who are part of the literate minority understand it to mean a perfection of language skill. They understand it to mean a perfection of language skill, as well as an exposure, to a range of text, to a range of, literary text, to a range of books, to a range of writings, uh, and are uh, and are signifiers of, literariness. They actually markers of, they are signifiers of literariness. So, a student majoring in this language is subject to the interpretation of the course by the university. Uh, the course indicates the individual as a kind of literary elite. The course uh, indicates the individual as a kind of literary elite who is somewhere at par with the products of English universities. So, this has implications for the social setup as well. This is indications of the social setup as well. In the world outside the academic one, in this world outside the academic one, the students of English literature are regarded in some way as superior to the rest. The students of English literature are regarded uh, in some way as superior to the rest. These are the biases. These are the biases generated by the canonical readings, by the readings containing canons, and of a course modeled in the ways of the West. So, the study of English literature is a study of English language as understood in the context of England. Important, very important, try to understand it. The study of English literature is a study of English language as understood in the context of England. What then is the application of a language in a context to which it did not belong at an earlier moment in history? While using English, we are the people in we are the people of the third world aware of the nuisance of the 19th century imperial policies in which it originated. But in in India today, English is a second language only in the name. It might not be the official language of India, but is definitely used in some way or other in different strata of the society. We are trying to suggest the impossibility of the introduction of the use of a new language in a context other than where uh, it is main language. So, what do we mean by the term canon, and how is it constructed? The term canon is a body of text, as I already told you the definition of the word canon, literary canon, and canon formation. The term canon is a body of text, the understanding of which constitutes the of a literary range of a group studying English literature. Texts that are part of this category are considered canonical and therefore constitutes literature. So, as we understand, the writings which is recognized, which is accepted as the standard writing, as authentic writing, and thereby it is canonized. Thereby it is canonized. So, on the other hand, text outside the canon, on the other hand, text outside the canon can be referred to as popular fiction, can be referred to as popular fiction, and some other alternative genres. For example, works by third world writers in English are not part of canon. Uh, so here it is made very clear that the on the other hand, the text outside the canon, which are not canonized, which does not belong to this category, can be referred to as popular fiction and some other alternative genres. Therefore, for example, works by third world writers in English are not part of the canon, and for them, a separate title has to be framed. We are familiar with the debate on the identity formation of writers of the third world. Identity formation. The canonized Chaucer, Shakespeare, their writings, their works are canonized. Uh, but the non-actually mm, uh, 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 canonical writings uh, in should they be grouped as post-colonial literatures? Should they be grouped as Commonwealth literature? Non-canonical writing. In all this, the canon constitutes to occupy a place of its own, and students studying a specialized course in English are subject to the canonicity of text, a predetermined concept that regulates their response to the given text. And in studying the formation of the canon, in studying the formation of the canon in this context, we will first take a look at the way it was understood. Uh, it was understood in the context of England. This, this is because our version of the canon is an offshoot of the one studied in the first world writers group. The canonical text of English literature have been based on the idea of Macaulay, Arnold, Newbert report, and by the influence of eminent figures like F.R. Lewis and T.S. Eliot. So, a cross section of 19th century English society, a cross section of 19th century English society shows the transformations in the structuring of its goal setup. Yeah, I mean, structuring of its setup, its social setup. Firstly, the economy of English society changed radically from a largely agrarian through emerging bourgeois society to a predominantly industrial one. Money came to more and more people and differentiated on class from the other. So the privileged group formed the upper class. The emerging section of that slowly becoming powerful. They occupied the second position in the society, and at the end, where the masses uprooted from the village, planted in the industry. The upper class also comprised the then, they belong to aristocratic group. They belong to aristocratic group. So, uh, actually, uh, this is uh, what 19th century England witnessed. Education and literature therefore rested in the hands of these few privileged people who had a limited perspectives. But as the middle class acquired power, they were they also received exposure to education. Who? The middle class. So actually, uh, education and literature rested in the hands of these few privileged people who had limited perspectives. But As the middle class acquired power, they also received exposure to education. So then we had the formation of the two conflicting points of view. What are they? The powerful group wanted to dominate the field of education, whereas the emergent middle class felt that the quality of literariness had to be passed on to more people, more and more people. Please underline it. The powerful group wanted to dominate the field of education, whereas the emergent middle class felt that quality of, I mean, the quality of literariness had to be passed on to people. Both groups had vested interest. The former wanted to preserve its power, whereas the latter wanted to attain it. So, uh, so naturally, in this background, canonization would be under question. Even though the middle class section wanted to make the system of education flexible, they had their they had their own limitations. They wanted education for certain individuals only and did not allow it to filter down to the masses. Canon was therefore formed and restructured to suit to suit the interest of these two groups. And obviously, when there is a difference uh, in social, background of these two groups, it leads us to inevitably to question of culture, to question on culture. So, in this situation, friends, in this situation, how did English literature become synonymous with culture? One of the major reasons for this was the approach Matthew Arnold adopted. According to him, in a scenario where the existence of God was increasingly subject to doubt, literature provided all the answers. Arnold noted that Darwin's theory of evolution fragmented the sensibility of people who had believed that their lives were regulated by the Christian idea of birth, suffering, death, and a life after death. On the other hand, science emerged as a body of knowledge. Science emerged as a body of knowledge that could provide logical answer to the questions that people confronted in life. As Arnold noted that Darwin's theory of evolution fragmented the sensibility of people who had believed that their lives were regulated by the Christian idea of birth, suffering, death, and life after death. Science emerged as a body of knowledge, and that could provide logical answer to the questions that people confronted in life. So, dear friends, as a consequence, what happened? Faith became an empty area without any basis. Thinkers like Arnold felt that literature could give more direction to the people of Victorian England in this regard. According to Arnold, culture was actually recommended as an answer. So see the role of literature, role of canon formation, role of canonization of literature, which are literature that was considered most authentic, and it passed on from that time. So the according to Arnold, therefore, culture was recommended as an answer to the present difficulties of society. The problems, however, remained that culture was accessible only to the privileged few, according to Arnold. So Arnold contributed to the formation of this literary canon. He played a very important role, uh, contributed to the formation of this literary canon by demarcating, by actually marking a specific section of society as possessing the capability to gain knowledge and truth. And another factor, uh, another factor, uh, another factor that contributed to the formation and dissemination of canonical works was the Newbold report, NEW, New BOLT, Bolt, Newbold RAPORT of 1921. Hmm. The teaching of English in England, the teaching of English in England, the English establishment had prepared the report with diligence. So this report operated at two levels. Newbert's report operated at two levels. It was aware, for instance, that the wake of nationalistic fervor, each nation and even community had become conscious of its own specific uh, cultural values, cultural indices. This had, this had actually serious political implications in the context of the imperialistic strategies employed by England at that time. So the British tried to foreground English as a universal language against French, a language that enjoyed a privileged place in the world till the beginning of the 20th century. So reports like the one by Newbert made way made way for the dissemination of English language in other countries, particularly in colonies, in colonial areas, in colonial countries. It asserted that English as a language with global significance and English literature as a great literature of the world. Very important. It asserted, the report of Newbold asserted that English as a language with global significance and English literature as the great, literature of the world. Familiarity with the English language became a prerequisite for becoming a part of the literary group. Therefore, a course in English acquired a literary value. A course in English occupied a literary value, and uh, they obviously they occupied a literary value, and uh, therefore this had serious political implications. The context of English, the context of serious implications in the context of the imperialist strategies employed by England. The British tried to foreground English as a universal language against French, a language that enjoyed a privileged place in the world till the beginning of the 20th century. Reports like one by Newbert made way for the dissemination of English language in the other countries, particularly in colonies. And obviously, it asserted that English as a language with global significance and English literature as a great literature of the world. So, familiarity with the English language became prerequisite for becoming a part of the literary group. Therefore, a course in English acquired a literary value not available to other courses. Arnold came in and by to give shape, to proper shape, SHEP shape to the canon by giving a special place to literature. And uh, Newbert's report elevated the English language to the level of a myth. So the role of Arnold and the role of Newbert uh, uh, can always be remembered so far the canon formation in literature is concerned. Arnold came in handy to give shape to the canon by giving special place to literature. And Newbert elevated the English language to the level of a myth. After the formation of this report, English became entwined with signifiers that indicated power, The teachers of this course regarded as missionaries by the report came people who had a significant role to perform in society. The teachers of this course who taught English literature, English language, regarded as missionaries by the report, became people who had a significant role to perform in society. They would not only impart education, but they would circulate belief in myth of Englishness, circulate the belief in the myth of Englishness, and a reading of English literature ensured a place with the large canon in society, its power structure. So, friends, another factor, very important factor that allowed for the perpetuation of, for the continuance of the canon by the influence of eminent literary personalities such as Levis, F.R. Levis, F.R. Levis, Levis, and T.S. Eliot in the first half of the 20th century. The idea circulated, the idea circulated by these people still have a determining influence on the minds of students in English universities as well as study centers outside England. Whereas Levis belonged to the lower middle class, Eliot was part of the aristocratic circle. Levis, F.R. Levis belonged to the lower middle class, whereas T.S. Eliot was part of the aristocratic circle that no longer enjoyed any power. So, Levis tried to formulate the canon so as to accommodate members of his class, the sensitive middle class individuals. Who? F.R. Levis. What did he do? Levis tried to formulate the canon so as to accommodate members of his class, the sensitive middle class individuals, but he did not extend it to the masses. So, he did not extend it to the masses. Thus, his view remained limited because he did not extend it to the masses. His views remained limited. Liberal humanist group behind the journal scrutiny believed in the essential goodness. So those who were liberal humanists, they wanted that the canonization of literature should be passed on to the masses instead of confining it to the middle class individual. And so therefore, the liberal humanist group behind the journal scrutiny believed in the essential goodness of individuals. The idea that there were certain people all over the world who were good in nature, therefore, they should also be involved. There, actually, the canonization or canon formation of literature should also be passed on to them. And the faith in individual goodness is a characteristic feature. The important thing is that the faith in individual goodness is a characteristic feature of such thinkers who try to privilege themselves as against the other. And the idea of scrutiny appealed to the minds of the people due to its liberal policy that allowed for an increase in the number of people who could be part of the literate group. This thinking suited the class ambitions of the bourgeois, that is, the class that wanted to figure in important position in society. Bourgeois, as you know, a class belonging to holding important positions in society are known as bourgeois. That is why F.R. Levis' thinking holds the attention of the students in academic institutions even today. The vested interest of the middle class people also influence significantly the object of the focus of English literature. And this can be seen in the formation of one of the greatest canonical work by Levis, the great tradition of Levy's great tradition. One of the this can be seen in the formation of one of the greatest canonical works by F.R. Levy's, the great tradition. A canonical work, therefore, privileges certain text as great literature, as we have already taken down, noted down. Canonical work privileges certain text as great literature and others as ordinary fiction. Non-canonical work are considered as ordinary fiction that provides entertainment. That is why the Levisian canon kept Dickens out of great tradition. Dickens may be considered as one of the pioneering writers, but his works actually are not considered as the canonical work, and the same treatment was meted out to women authors like Emily or Charlotte Bronte. The attitude of Lewis, coupled with his wide appeal to the student of literature, has contributed to the formation of the canon in our context. So, another interesting feature that Lewis also introduced into the literature was the association of literature with criticism. Association of literature with its comments, critical appreciation, critical criticism. Before him, the relation between the two, I mean literature and criticism, had remained largely undefined. In this one, uh, in this one must discuss the contribution of T.S. Eliot too, and as pointed out earlier by T.S. Eliot, belong to the T.S. Eliot belong to a class, belong to that class, looking for ways and means to assert itself in the contemporary scenario. One of the ways in which it could manifest itself was by allying with new intelligentsia as embodied in Lewis and others. Eliot's class aspirations became clear by an analysis of this idea and criticism. His essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, one of the important essays of T.S. Eliot, tradition and the individual talent is as considered an important marker in the association between literature and criticism. So, in this context of literature, he created a position, he created a space for himself for, by foregrounding criticism that focuses on the idea of tradition. According to him, a study of literary criticism would be meaningless without bringing in the works of the past. It is rightly T.S. Eliot says that according to him, a study of literary criticism without the meaning, without would be meaningless. A study of literary criticism would be meaningless without bringing in the works of the past. In a way, the idea was interesting, and it looked for a cohesive view of literature. And there can be no doubt that T.S. Eliot was able to accommodate the powerless aristocracy as an important figure in the literary field by invoking the idea of tradition. However, his idea of what constituted tradition was rather arbitrary. Eliot's, therefore, is considered his idea of what constituted tradition was rather arbitrary. And Eliot's early poetry suggested that meaning could not be located in society but in a vague or undefined time. The world had become, uh, in his views, too complex and was beyond comprehension. So, uh, according to this is the but uh, canonization in Indian context can also be cannot be actually cannot be left behind. Uh, in the so far canon in Indian literature, canons in Indian literature, the Indian national movement spearheaded by Gandhi, the Indian national movement spearheaded by Nehru, since the end of World War the First, had generated a great deal of excitement among the youth of India who craved for freedom and justice. We are discussing canonization in the context of Indian literature, Indian writing. So far, the Indian context is concerned, the Indian national movement spearheaded by Gandhi and Nehru since the end of World War the First had generated a great deal of excitement among the youth of India who craved for freedom and justice. So, therefore, uh, our society developed great reading. Our society developed great reading habits, and which is a positive sign, uh, and they play a very important role. Gandhi, Nehru, many other Indian writers play a very important role uh, uh, of canonization. So, and curiosity to know about events, curiosity to know about happenings in India also grew, and to know about the happenings of the world among the Indians also grew. They were inspired by the ideas of honesty, simplicity, courageousness, behavior, and self respect. More than all these, they became committed to the change at the grassroots level, taking their endeavor as close to the masses as people. There is no wonder that the era of Gandhi, the era of Nehru in the 20th century changed the very concept of morality, ethics, and meaningful life, and inspired people to interpret their existence in genuine secular terms. So, when there is uh, themes like morality, ethics, uh, and the curiosity grew among them, they also developed the habits of reading, and the great reading habits developed, curiosity among the masses developed, and actually, whereas Western life and thought were marked by despondency, stagnation in the first half of the 20th century, uh, uh, Indians masses in the corresponding period, Indian masses in the corresponding period moved towards a future, moved towards a future, hoped for better future, a future expected to meet their truly humanist aspirations. So, an unprecedented surge in literature, an unprecedented actually aspiration in literatures of the Indian language bears ample testimony to this. An unprecedented surge in literatures, Indian literatures, uh, and languages bear ample testimony to this. This literature took up from where the realistic secular writing of England, France, and America had left in the 18th and 19th century. Even the English writing in India did not remain untouched by this phenomenon, in which projection of life, such as such as witnessed in Mulkraj Anand's novel, vied for honors with their counterparts with Indian languages. Old definitions, which are considered orthodox, sectarian, and irrational, of life and literature were discarded to give place to a number of new challenging ideas that challenging ideas that would uh, that would actually excite and create enthusiasm among the learners, among the readers, among the citizens of an independent country. This became possible because uh, collective thought and practice in India increasingly assumed the nature of secular humanist protest against the forces of exploitation. So, therefore, uh, uh, while considering the canonization in Indian context, it is important to underline the fact that the Indian writers can also be taken into consideration and can be regarded as the great actually pioneer of canon formation, canonization of literature in India. This view, Gandhi did not find favor with the Indian youth and new situation. They were witness to the ambiguous wage of property owners and of whom it had begun to appreciate and imbibe the liberalism of a section of English regime. So, the idea of liberalism in the 1930s in India combined with modernity, new education and a kind of social role, new education and a kind of social role that adhered to the principle of reforms. And according to a section of new elite who had roots in privilege, elite group who had roots in privilege, one was expected to emulate the Western example of living meaningfully, pursuing refinement and culture amidst inequality, injustice, and poverty. For them, rights had to be earned by the multitude of people through a long and peaceful struggle for elegance and dignity. So, needless to say, it is needless to say that the majority of the educated middle classes in India, the majority of the educated, I mean middle class, of India, classes of India, uh, uh, actually they developed, uh, uh, I mean, tremendous reading habit, and thereby uh, the 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 questioning of canonization cannot be cannot arise. So far we discuss canonization or canon formation in Indian context. Okay. With this, I conclude the discussion, participants. With this, I conclude my discussion. So, as you know, we covered blocks 6 and 7 today, and you may get a question, uh, mm, probable question, the canon formation or questioning canon and uh, canon formation in Indian English writing. You may also get short notes, canon formation or institutionalization of literature. You may get short notes also from it, this section. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for
Hello.
attending the classes.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
Thank you.
Hello, good morning, sir.
हाँ हाँ हेलो।
Hello,
हाँ
sir.
हाँ ପଛେ କରବ କେଁ? ହଁ ଶୈଳୀ ହେ କାମର ଲାଗି ଯାଇଥିଲି ହେଟା ଟିକେ ସକାଳ ଆଁ ଆଁ ଠିକ ଚାଲିଛି। ହୁଁ ଠିକ ଠାକ ଚାଲିଛି। ହଁ ସେଟା ସେ କହିଲି ଯେ ସେ ତାର ଯେନ୍ ଗାଡି କହୁଥିଲେ ସେ ଗାଡିଟା ତ ହଣ୍ଡା ସିଟି ନା ନ ଏଇ ପାଖାପାଖି କାହାରି ସେଟା ଜଷ୍ଟ ଗୋଟେ କହିଲେ ସେ ଜଷ୍ଟ ଜଣକର ନଥିଲା ସେ ମନା କଲା। ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଜଣଙ୍କର ନିକେ ଏଟା ଗଲୁ ଗଲେ ସେ ବୋଇଲେ ଆଜ୍ଞା ସେ ଡ୍ରାଇଭର ଗୋଟେ ଛୁଟିରେ ଅଛି ଆଇବା ନା ଆଇବା ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଅଛି ଡ୍ରାଇଭର ଏଟା ମୁଁ ବୋଲି କେନ୍ସି ହିସାବରେ କରୁ ଏଟା ତ କାଣା ଗୋପାଳଜୀରୁ ଚଞ୍ଚଲ କଲ୍ୟାଣ ମଣ୍ଡପ 2 ଘଣ୍ଟା କି 2.5 ଘଣ୍ଟାର କାମ ଆଉ ଗାଁ ଗାଁ କଲା ତାପରେ ସେ ଫୁଲ ସଜାବାରଟା କାଣା ଆଜ୍ଞା ଫୁଲ ସଜାଲେ ସେ ଧୋଇବାର ଲାଗି ବହୁତ ପଇସା ନେଇ ଯାଉଛନ୍ ଇଏ କରୁଛନ୍ ଛଡାବା ଏଟା ହେଲା ମୁଁ କହିଲି ହଁ ଯେନ୍ଟା ନେବେ ନେବେ ଆଉ ତ ଏଇଟା ହ୍ୱାଇଟ ଗାଡି ଭଲ ନୂଆ ଗାଡି ଭଲ ଅଛି ହେଥିର ଲାଗି କେନ୍ସି ହିସାବରେ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା କରୁନ ବୋଇଲେ ଯେ ଠିକ ଅଛି ଆଜ୍ଞା ଭଲ ସେଟା ସେ କହିଲା ଏଟା ହଁ କହିଛେ ତ ତଥାପି ଆଜି ଫେର ସନ୍ଧ୍ୟାରେ ଫେର ଫୋନ କରମି ବୋଲିଛି ଫୋନ ନମ୍ବରଟା ରଖିଛି ମୋର ତ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଗାଡି ସେ ଟାଉନ ରେ ଯେନ୍ଟା ଅଛି ତା ଡ୍ରାଇଭର ନାଇଁନ ସେ ଡ୍ରାଇଭର ଟେ ଖଞ୍ଜିଲେ ସେ ଗାଡି ଆଣିବ ଯେ ଡ୍ରାଇଭର ଟା ମିଲବାଟା ଏତେ ସହଜ ନୁହେସି ମୋର ତ ଲାଗି 3 ଆଉ 4 2 ଦିନ ଗାଡି ଲାଗି ଡ୍ରାଇଭର ଟେ ଏଟା କହିଲେ ଯେ 3 ଆଉ 4 କରବ କା ଲୋକାଲ ବୋଇଲେ ଯେ ହଁ ବଲଛି ତ ସେ ଏ ପିଲାଟି ଆଗରୁ ମୋର ଚଲାଉଥିଲା ଆଜ୍ଞା ମଝିରେ ମଝିରେ ଯାଉଥିଲା। ଭଲ ରିଲାଏବୁଲ ପିଲା ଚିହ୍ନା ପରିଚୟ ବି ତଥାପି ଆଜି ଯିମେ ଆଁ ନାଇଁ 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 ଯାଇ ତମ ଆମେ ଅଲଗା ଯାଇଛି ଥରେ 2 ଥର ଯାଇଛି କଲେଜ 2 ଥର ଖଣ୍ଡେ ଯାଇଛି ସେ ହଁ ହଁ ଠିକ ଅଛି ହଁ ବଲଛ କରବି ବଲଛ ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ଦେଖୁ କାଣା ହଉଛି ଏଇମାନେ ତ ଫର ତ ଏଇଟା ହୁଁ କେନ୍ଟାକି ବରାତି ସେଟା ତ ସେ ମାନେ 3,500 3,500 ନେବି କହୁଥିଲା 3,500 ନେବା ସେଟାକୁ ସେ କହିଲା 5-6 ହଜାର ଲେଖା ନଉଛନ୍ ଆପଣ ଯେତେ ଦେବେ ବୋଇଲା ଯେ ମୁଁ ବୋଲି ସେ ଆଜ୍ଞା ଯାର ସାଙ୍ଗେ ଯାଇଥିଲୁ ସେ ବୋଲେ କେତେ ଦେମା ସେ ତ କହୁଛି 4-5 ନେସନ ବୋଲିକିରି ଏଇଟା ପାଖ ଯାହା ଦେବେ ବୋଲୁଛେ ଆଉ 4-5 ସେ ରଖୁଛି ବୋଲେ ଆମେ କେତେ ବୋଲି 3,500 ଆଡେ ତାହାକେ ଦେମା ବୋଇଲେ ଠିକ ହେବା କି ନାଇଁ ବୋଇଲେ ଯେ ହଁ ହେଲେ ଠିକ ହେବା ବୋଲୁଥିଲେ ସେ ଦେଖମା ସେ ଇଆଡେ ସିଆଡେ ବେଶୀ 500 ଟଙ୍କା ଇଆଡେ ସିଆଡେ ହେବ ଆଉ ଏଇଟା ତ ହୁଣ୍ଡା ସେଠି 10,000 ବୋଇଲା ପରେ କିଏ ଗୋଟେ କି ଅଶୋକ କାଲ ଗୋଟେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ହଁ 10,000 ସେମାନେ ସେ ପଇସା ଯିଏ ଦଉ ସେମାନେ ଦଉନ କି ତମେ ଦଉ କିନ୍ତୁ ହେତେ ପଇସା ଦେଇକରି ଲାଭ କାଣା 2 ଘଣ୍ଟା ଲାଗି 10,000 ଟଙ୍କା ଗୋଟେ ଫିକିବ କାଁ ଅଛି ଆମରଟା ବିଲ୍ କେବେ କି 3,500-4,000 ନେଇଥିଲା ଏଟା ପାନ୍ଥ ନିବାସରୁ ମହାନଦୀ କ୍ଲବ ସେମାନେ କାଣ କି ସେ ବରାତି ଲାଗି ସେ ଯାଇ ହେଥି ଲାଗି ଗୋଟେ ଆମାଉଣ୍ଟ ଫିକ୍ସ ରଖିଦେଇଛନ୍ ଏଟା ହୁଁ ଏଇଟା ଠିକ ଅଛି ହେ ଗାଡି ଠିକ ଅଛି କରିଛ ହେଇ କାମରେ ଏଇଟା ଥିଲି ତ ହୁଁ ଆଉ କାଣା କହୁଥିଲ କେନ୍ଟା ଗୋଟେ କହୁଥିଲ କାଣା କହିବି ବୋଲିକି ହୁଁ ହଁ 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 ଠିକ ଅଛି ସେନେ ପଛେ କଥା ହେମା ଫିର ଆଁ ହଁ ହଁ ଖାଇଲି ନା ଚୁଡ଼ା ଚିଟକା ହୁଁ ନାଇଁ କାହିଁ ସୋନାଲି କି ଜର ହଉଛି କାଲି 101.6 ଥିଲା କାଲି ଆଜି ବି ଅଛି 100 କେତେ ଅଛି ହୁଁ ଆଉ କାଣା ନା ସେଟା ଏ ପରଦିନ ଫେରେ ଆମର ଯିବାର ଅଛି କି ନାଇଁ ଏଟା ଫେଷ୍ଟ ହୁଁ ଏନ୍ତା କଥା ଆଉ କାଁ କରବ କହ। ଆଉ ଏଟା ସେ କାଲି କଥା ହଉଥିଲ ଯେ ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଦେଖମା ଯଦି ନା ହେଲା ସେ ପାନ୍ଥନିବାସରେ ଗୋଟେ ଯୋଡେ ରୁମ୍ ବୁକ୍ କରିଦେଲେ ସେମାନେ ରହିବେ ଆଉ ଅଲଗା ମାନେ ଏଇ ମଣ୍ଡପରେ ଆଡଜଷ୍ଟ କରିବେ ବୋଲେ କରିବେ ଗୋଟେ ଯୋଡେ ରୁମ୍ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ହୁଁ କାମ ବଢେଇ ଦଉଛନ୍ ନା ଏଟା ନାଇଁ କି ହୁଁ ଆଉ ଯାହା ହେଲେ ବି ସକାଳେ ଜଳଖିଆ ଟା ତମେ ବାଧ୍ୟ ଦେବାକେ ପଡବା ଯଦି ରାତି ସେମାନେ ଖାଇକିରି ଆସିଲେ ସକାଳେ ତ ଜଳଖିଆ କରିବାର ବାଧ୍ୟ ହଁ ହଁ ହୁଁ ହୁଁ ମୁଁ ବୋଲି ଏଇଟା କହିଲି ନାଇଁ ନାଇଁ ସେ ଯଦି ସେ ପିଲା ତାର ଫ୍ୟାମିଲିର ଆଇଲେ ବେଟର ହେବା ପାନ୍ଥନିବାସରେ ଦୁଇଟା ରୁମ୍ ନେଇଗଲେ ଭଲ ହେବା ବୋଲି ହେନେ ଚାହା ପାଣି ଯେନ୍ଟା ତାଙ୍କର ସୁବିଧା ଅଛି ହେନେ ସେ ହେଟା ଯଦି କନଫର୍ମ କର ତାପରେ ତ ଆଉ 8 ଦିନ ଅଛି ନା ତମର ଆଜି ଆଉ 8 ଦିନ ବୋଲେ ସେ ମାନେ କୋଉଡିଟା ମନେକର ନାଇଁ ଥିବା ହେତକି ବେଲେ ତାଙ୍କର ହିସାବରେ ବାହାରିବେ ସେମାନେ ଆଉ ତାପରେ ହେଟା ତାଙ୍କ ସହଜିଆ ଉପାୟ କିନା ସେମାନେ ଆସିବେ ବୋଲେ ଏନକେ ରାତି 11-12 ବଜେ ପହଞ୍ଚିବେ ହଁ ଫେର ଯଦି ଫେର ତମକୁ କହିଲେ ନାଇଁ ଆମେ ସେ ବାଟରେ କେନ ଖାଇମୁ ସେନ ଖାଇବାର ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା କର ବୋଲେ ଫେର ସେଟା ଗୋଟେ ଟେନସନ ହେଇଯିବ ଫେର ଏନ୍ତା କା ହୁଁ 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 ଦେଖ ନହେଲେ ସକାଳେ କିଛି ନାହିଁ ପୁରୀ ତରକାରୀ ଜିଲବି ଏଟା କରିଦେଲେ ହେଟା ହେଇଯିବ ହେଟା ହୁଁ